The year is 2000. The biggest superstar in baseball has just finished up a decade of Cooperstown-worthy play where he near single-handedly resurrected baseball in a city full of dedicated fans, some of whom waited multiple decades to watch meaningful baseball played at the Kingdome. After 10 All-Star appearances and Gold Gloves, 7 Silver Sluggers, just shy of 400 home runs, a playoff series win against his arch-nemesis, an injury that led to a brand new stadium, 4 video game covers, a themed chocolate bar, a rap song, and most importantly, an episode of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Ken Griffey Jr. entered the final year of his contract in Seattle, already having cemented himself as one of the most iconic players to ever play the game of baseball. To any baseball fan, seeing Ken Griffey Jr. and the Seattle Mariners apart was never in the discussion. It always felt like that was the place that was home for him. But the thing is, baseball fans had no idea what was going on inside the brain of the kid. And in 2000, Jr. was going to shock the baseball world. This led Ken Griffey Jr. to a new contract in a new city with a new uniform as a new era of baseball was ushered in. And as he became the story of the offseason, the future that he carved out with a new team wouldn't be the one that anyone remembers him for when looking back on his famed career. Today we're going to explore why Ken Griffey Jr. and the Cincinnati Reds never worked out. With each passing mediocre season, the story gets crazier and crazier, so let's waste no more time and dive right in. A myriad of personal issues had distanced Ken Griffey Jr. emotionally from the city he had called home for a decade. After the sudden passing of his neighbor, famed golfer Payne Stewart, Griffey felt a strong desire to be near his family back home in Cincinnati, Ohio. It wasn't always this way, though. A year prior, in 1998, the Mariners and Ken Griffey Jr. heavily explored a contract extension to keep him in a teal uniform. There was even an agreed-upon framework of a deal worth $140 million over the next 8 seasons, as said by Brian Goldberg, Griffey's former agent. This would have been a dream come true for Seattle's side, as it would have better equipped them for the impending Alex Rodriguez free agency sweepstakes, set to take place a year from that time.
Ken Griffey Jr., 301 lifetime average.
Where the owners are always willing to help out.
Excuse me, it's 302.
Another league. This is the Supreme Sicilian. This is Ken Griffey giving a baseball a facial.
You what?
But as the 1998 season winded down, Griffey struggled to find adequate time with his son Trey, who was enrolled in school full-time for the first time in his young life. With travel and distance being such a, quote, miserable situation for Griffey, he never ended up signing on the dotted line. When the offseason came, Griffey gave the front office the okay to explore trading him. Before Griffey would ever put on a Reds uniform, he'd first need to be traded, and Griffey's list of considered destinations was limited in his no-trade rights. There was the obvious destination, hometown Cincinnati, where his father currently resided as a coach on the Reds staff. But other teams remained in hot pursuit, including the New York Mets, Atlanta Braves, and Houston Astros. For the team in Queens, a trade was even agreed upon. Relievers Octavio Dotel, otherwise known as your favorite answer in the Immaculate Grid, as well as Armando Benitez, otherwise known as my dad's most hated Met ever, as well as young outfielder Roger Cedeno. These 3 players would headline a package going to Seattle in exchange for the final year of Griffey's contract. But under a tight window of time, Griffey vetoed the trade, paving the way for one of the greatest what-if scenarios in MLB history. For baseball fans, it was, what if Ken Griffey Jr. joined the Mets just as they were about to make a World Series appearance in 2000? For Mets fans, it was, what if we got to be happy for once? But this video is not about the Mets, it's about the Cincinnati Reds and their general manager Jim Bowden, who's a main character in the story. The Reds re-entered the driver's seat in negotiations. Bowden initially had balked at infielder Pokey Reese being part of the deal, with the 26-year-old middle infielder coming off a 4-WAR season. And if this trade had never finalized in the end, the story of Jim Bowden not trading for Ken Griffey Jr. because he loved Pokey Reese that much would be amazing. But alas, after Griffey's veto towards the Mets, the Reds and Mariners found a swap that worked. Seattle received talented outfielder Mike Cameron, pitcher Brett Tomko, and a pair of prospects that never ended up playing for the Mariners. Ken Griffey Jr. was finally home, as stated in his own words at the initial press conference.
I'm finally home.
And he was here to stay. Griffey inked a 9-year extension worth $116.5 million, nearly $25 million less than his agreement would have been had he stayed with the Mariners.
I'm a big fan of Ken Griffey Jr.
Why?
Because he's a really good baseball player.
Coming off a 1999 campaign where the Reds made it to a crucial Game 163 before ultimately missing the playoffs, adding a player of Ken Griffey Jr.'s caliber was a surefire move to put them over the edge and end their 4-year postseason drought.
Find the seams. It's the splitter. No, it's the high heat. Did I lock my keys in the car? Is that Sosa? Going for my Pepsi. Sammy. The one leader.
With only one postseason berth in the last 9 years to that point, expectations were certainly raised for this historic ball club. Yet, despite the lineage of his father, who wore that same Reds uniform and won 2 World Series rings while doing it, as well as the already legendary status of Ken Griffey Jr.'s career to that point, the next decade of Reds baseball can only be categorized as mediocre and disappointing. Whether you want to blame Jr. himself or the Reds organization for not supporting him enough, the next decade of baseball would not be nearly as kind to Ken Griffey Jr. as the 90s had been. Let's figure out everything that went wrong, starting in our first year, which might be our most painful. We start by ushering the new millennium in with our star in a new uniform. Jim Bowden had successfully brought Jr. home in early February, and with a club that won 96 games a year prior, the Cincinnati Reds roster looked ready to go to war. The lineup around Ken Griffey Jr. was laden with names you know. Sean Casey, who was on his way to a second straight season hitting over 300 with an OPS over 900. In the outfield was Dante Bichette, a 4-time All-Star with over 200 career home runs to that point. Joining him out there would be third-year Reds outfielder Dimitri Young, who would add a career-best 18 home runs in 2000. He was one of 5 hitters with a batting clip over 300 in the everyday lineup. Over at shortstop, there was still 36-year-old Barry Larkin kicking around, and he would make his 11th All-Star team and hit .313 that year. This Reds lineup could go toe-to-toe with any team in baseball, and that was before they added one of the greatest players in the history of the game to the lineup. Still, when looking back, Cincinnati's heavy pursuit of Ken Griffey Jr. did take their attention away from a fairly deep pitching market that would have helped them in free agency. Chuck Finley went to Cleveland and won 16 games. Kenny Rogers went to Texas and hurled over 225 innings. Aaron Seeley actually headed to Seattle and made his second All-Star team. The Reds likely could have afforded any of these pitchers, and any of the 3 likely would have become the ace of the team by season's end. Instead, they rolled into the 2000 season with largely the same pitching staff from a year before, one that did rank in the top 5 of ERA in baseball in the steroid era, but clearly could have benefited from another arm. Before we continue on with this story, I want to thank T-Mobile for sponsoring today's Jolly Olive video. Baseball is back, which means it's time to be tracking every series, every game, and every pitch, and T-Mobile is here to help by bringing back the best offer in baseball. T-Mobile is once again offering its members free MLB TV. That's $150 in savings. This means I can stream my favorite team all season long wherever I am, whether I'm on the go, at home. It's the entire MLB right at my fingertips. And if you're worried about the time crunch, there's still plenty of time to switch before the MLB season gets going. You can redeem the offer starting March 24th through March 30th at T-Mobile.com/MLB. So click the link down below and take advantage of this offer today. And thank you to T-Mobile for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back to the story of Ken Griffey Jr. and the Cincinnati Reds. Let's fast forward to early June, where the Reds will finish off a sweep of the Minnesota Twins to gain sole possession of first place in the National League Central Division 65 games into the season. Surprisingly enough, to this point, the media has come down on Ken Griffey Jr. for what has been a disappointing year so far, hitting just a shade over the Mendoza line to this point. The offense as a whole for the Reds ranked near the bottom of the league, while it was the pitching staff that held a top 3 mark for ERA, leading most to believe this Reds team could kick it up a notch and get even better when the offense started performing as many expected them to. As if on cue, Griffey would turn in a monster month in June of 2000, hitting .304 with an OPS north of 1100, thanks to 12 home runs in just 26 games. It was Griffey's first time truly showing the Reds faithful the absolute powerhouse he could be, the type of player that could carry a team on his back single-handedly. The thing is, that adage doesn't really apply to baseball. You can only hit once in every 9 terms. There's no one player that can single-handedly bring a team to the brink of contention, and Ken Griffey Jr. would experience that time and time again during his Mariners tenure, as well as his Reds tenure. The roster around him completely crumbled when Griffey ascended back to stardom. The Reds put together their worst record in Griffey's best month, going just 10-17 in June, including 11 losses in 12 games, a day after they came into sole possession of first place in the Central. The rest of that inaugural season followed a similar story. The Reds would claw towards a winning record, tumble back down, all the while Ken Griffey Jr. was putting together his usual special season at the forefront. Despite 85 wins at season's end, another year with a respectable winning record, the Cincinnati Reds finished as an afterthought in the National League playoff chase. Another year, another missed opportunity for postseason play in Griffey's historic career, one of the nagging issues that led to his decision to eventually leave Seattle in the first place. The Reds had also wasted a great first year from Griffey in a Reds uniform. He hit 40 home runs for the 5th straight season in a row to go along with 118 runs batted in and an OPS that was 33% better than league average, even after a slow first 2 months of the season. But this was just the first season of a 9-year one-year agreement, so any shortcomings weren't the end-all be-all. It's just the Reds had to turn in a better year with expectations continuously rising. In 2001, Griffey was entering his age 31 season, only having missed significant time once in his career thanks to the suspect turf of the Kingdome back in 1995. And the thing is, the Reds had all the pieces to be successful in 2001. The roster from the year before ranked 6th in staff ERA, once again in the top 10, and they also had 8 players on offense with an above-league average OPS+, tied for the most in baseball with the Orioles. Because of this, the front office didn't make many changes to the roster and instead fired the leadership, letting manager Jack McKeon go in the offseason. 2 years later, McKeon would step in to manage the Florida Marlins, and he led them to a World Series victory in his very first season. Let's now talk about that 2001 regular season, the sophomore year of Ken Griffey Jr. and the Reds. They got off to a similarly strong start like the year before, ending April with a 14-9 record, tied for first place in the division. Cincinnati accomplished this with Jr. in a very limited role, as the star was held to just pinch hit appearances in the first month. When Griffey went 0 for 12 in such cases and wasn't healing from his hamstring injury fast enough, the Reds put him on the injured list, with Griffey not returning until June 15th. The 6 weeks that Griffey would go on to miss in that season would basically be the entire season for the 2001 Reds. By the time Jr. returned, the club had already tumbled far out of contention, losing 35 of their next 46 games after a strong start. The 2001 campaign had basically ended before Griffey could even start his first game of the year, though he would play through the rest of the season healthy. Griffey's output was still solid, putting together just shy of 2 WAR in 120 games, slashing an OPS 24% better than league average with 42 extra base hits in this small sample of playing time. Even with his solid performance, the Reds finished 30 games under 500, their worst season in 20 years' time. If year 1 was slightly disappointing, year 2 was a massive disappointment, and neither of these seasons were considerably Ken Griffey Jr.'s fault. But when you demand to be in a certain place and sign this kind of contract, all the blame is going to go on the superstar. In 2002, things truly began to get ugly for this marriage. After another offseason shedding payroll rather than adding to it, it all started with a bad omen in the preseason. In late February, Ken Griffey Sr. abruptly announced his resignation from the Reds coaching staff, citing health issues as his reason. However, this blindsided the roster and coaches alike in the process. Just 6 games into the regular season, a rundown collision led to a dislocated kneecap for Ken Griffey Jr., leading to a 42-game injured list stint. Not only is this when Griffey's hard-nosed, high-energy style of play began to work against him, but this is also where the narrative of Griffey's injuries plaguing the Reds really began. The kid would miss nearly 100 games with various lower body injuries that year. He returned in late May, but would go back on injured leave in late June when he re-aggravated the same hamstring injury from a year prior. Recurring leg and back injuries sapped Jr. of his seamless power. He put together a 784 OPS and just 8 home runs in 70 games, which would normally be acceptable numbers for someone who wasn't named Ken Griffey Jr. This culminated in his first season being worth negative value and wins above replacement as his defense in center field waned heavily. This all pointed towards another forgettable year of Reds baseball. Outside of great first full seasons from Adam Dunn and Austin Kearns, there wasn't much positivity to pull out of a lackluster 78-win campaign by Cincinnati, and the fans and organization eagerly looked to turn the page to the next year with new aspirations, as well as a new stadium. 2003 marked the first year of play in Great American Ballpark, the home of the Cincinnati Reds for the past 2 decades plus. Amazingly, in the 2 decades plus since the Reds have called this ballpark home, there's only been 2 home playoff games in that entire window. And spoiler alert, neither of them would involve Ken Griffey Jr. A change of scenery didn't prove to cause a change of production for this middling club. But again, the story of the season was focused squarely on Griffey, who was injured in the first week of the year for the 2nd season in a row, this time with a dislocated shoulder caused by diving for a fly ball. Later on, he would rupture a tendon in his right ankle, which was immediately after a stretch where he had homered in 5 straight games out of the All-Star break. It was another painful twisting of the knife that showed Red fans the player he could be, if not for numerous betrayals by his own body. Though he played better in his limited games this time around, he missed more games in 2003 than he did the year prior, playing in just 53 of the total 162. From 2002 to 2004, Griffey missed 260 of his total 486 eligible games, which is a percentage over half. Though his numbers proved to still be star level in this time, the Reds were feeling the weight of his absence year in and year out, with Griffey only getting older in each passing campaign. By the time 2005 rolled around, we were in year 6 of this contract. Griffey was 35 years old, and many were questioning how much longer the kid was going to try and hang around in MLB, considering his litany of injuries in recent times. The Cincinnati Reds had even tried to bail themselves out of Griffey's Griffey's monstrous contract. Not by urging him to retire, but rather trying to trade him. That's right, Ken Griffey Jr. was almost a San Diego Padre. There was a one-for-one swap agreed upon after the 2003 season that would have sent the kid to San Diego and brought Phil Nevin to the Cincinnati Reds. And you might be thinking, well, Griffey probably nixed this one, right? Wrong. Phil Nevin vetoed the trade. The future Angels manager came out and said that he wanted to remain on the West Coast and was very candid about it, which kind of blew the Reds' cover because at the time they were saying, no, we would never try to trade Ken Griffey Jr. And then they had to come clean and say, yeah, we tried to trade him. Our bad. At the conclusion of the 2004 campaign, with frustration boiling over from both sides, team physician Timothy Kremchek convinced Ken Griffey Jr. to move forward with a controversial and experimental surgery that he dubbed the Junior Operation. Griffey was continuously suffering from hamstring injuries, so he would repair that torn hamstring using 3 screws to attach the damaged tendon to the bone, a type of procedure that Kremchek said was unheard of in years prior. Griffey would have to keep his leg unmoved at a 90-degree angle for over a month's time in a grueling rehabilitation process. But in May of 2005, after a lackluster first month of the season, baseball fans began to see flashes and glimpses of the player that made many of them fall in love with the game in the first place. Griffey clubbed 7 home runs in May of that season, his most in a month in ages. This time, there was no other shoe that would drop, though. He kept it going in June, hitting 6 more home runs. From the beginning of July to season's end, only 4 players had a higher weighted runs created plus than Griffey's mark of 174 in 56 games. No player had a better slugging clip than his mark of 678 as well. 2005 was the kid's best season in a long time, playing in 128 games, his most in a season since 2000. He hit 35 home runs, more than his prior 2 seasons combined. Griffey ended up winning Comeback Player of the Year honors, turning the clock back at age 35. Also, this isn't related to the story at all, but I feel like I need to mention it because I found it out. The MLB Comeback Player of the Year award that year was presented by Viagra. So just, do with that information what you will. But even Griffey's feel-good season couldn't bring the Reds back into relevance, as the club finished with another losing season and 5th place finish, even with a roster of new young faces like Bronson Arroyo and Edwin Encarnacion. That wouldn't stop Griffey's Renaissance tour, though. He kept it going with a tremendous performance in the inaugural World Baseball Classic, hitting over 500 with 3 home runs in 6 games for Team USA. A positional swap also helped the kid stay on the field more after moving from center field, returning to the All-Star game in 2007, but still, no postseason play would come at any point in Griffey's tenure with the Cincinnati Reds. But that 2007 season is significant for a different reason. That same year, Griffey would return to Seattle to play baseball for the first time since his final season with the Mariners in 1999. There were still front office members with the club that were there when Griffey was a member of the team, and they'd put together an effort to make something special happen for Griffey's return. The Seattle Mariners honored Jr. with a ceremony in June of 2007, crediting Griffey with saving baseball in Seattle and honoring him for his time in their uniform.
Never that I imagined that it'd be like this coming back. This place will be home. I didn't realize how much I missed being in Seattle.
Griffey, shocked at the ovation and fanfare for his return, considering how his tenure ended, obviously became emotional and thankful to the first fans that ever rooted for him in MLB. In the final game of the series, Griffey, always having a knack for the spectacular, clubbed 2 home runs in a single game against his former club. In 2008, the Reds would finally trade Griffey in the final year of his 9-year pact, sending him to the south side of Chicago, where he'd help the White Sox return to the postseason for the first time since winning the World Series in 2005. After his 2-year return to Seattle in his late 30s, Ken Griffey Jr. would finally step away from baseball at age 40 in the middle of the 2010 season, once again to fanfare from the Seattle faithful. When I was a kid playing my favorite baseball game, I was shocked to find out that Ken Griffey Jr. was on the Cincinnati Reds, not the Seattle Mariners, when I booted up the game, and this video is emblematic of all the reasons why. When you recall Ken Griffey Jr. in a Seattle Mariners uniform, you think of the fond memories and historic accomplishments that he made in that time. But when picturing him in a Reds uniform, the only thoughts that come to mind kind or bittersweet. When the kid was actually on the field for the Cincinnati Reds, he consistently demonstrated that he was still the same guy he was the decade prior when healthy. When that initial 9-year extension was signed, Reds fans and the organization itself expected Griffey to pack the ballpark, put up big numbers, and chase Hank Aaron's home run record. Instead, what they got was one of the most infamous 9-figure contracts in baseball history, one that became a major drag on a small market payroll. Ken Griffey Jr. was always a surefire Hall of Famer and still accomplished so much, but part of me wishes his body held up in this Reds tenure to see just how far he could have taken that career. Instead, we're left with a myriad of what-ifs, like we so often are when considering great players in the history of the game. But that is the story of why Ken Griffey Jr. and the Reds never worked out. If you watched this video all the way to the end, thank you so much. Please consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel. I'd really appreciate it. That'll do it for me though, and I'll see you guys next time.